What if everything we thought we knew about human limits was only part of the story? In the quiet moments between thunderclaps and heartbeats, hidden within the folds of ordinary lives, there are rare individuals who defy what science says is possible. Their abilities are not the stuff of legend or fiction. They are documented, measured, tested, and still unexplained. This is not a tale of superhumans, but of humans made super by chance, trauma, or something deeper, something buried in the architecture of the brain, in the blueprint of the body, waiting. Our journey begins not with answers, but with questions. Questions sparked by the stories of 10 people whose minds and bodies broke through the ceiling of human possibility. They were not born into fame or power. Many lived quietly, some forgotten, some feared, some studied with wonder. Yet each unlocked a capacity so far beyond the norm, it disrupted the very fabric of what scientists believed about biology, neurology, and consciousness. Take the man who, after being struck by lightning, awoke with an untouched understanding of advanced mathematics, solving problems faster than trained professors. Or the blind traveler who sees with sound, navigating city streets using echolocation with precision that rivals sonar. There is the woman who can recall every day of her life as vividly as if it were happening now. The mother who lifted a car to save her son. The autistic artist who recreates entire skylines from memory with photographic detail. The healer whose hands seem to speak to cells in ways no medical instrument can replicate. None of these stories come from ancient myth. They've been examined in modern hospitals and university labs, dissected by skeptical researchers, and affirmed by data. And still they don't make sense, at least not in the world of settled science. Each chapter of this story will dive into one of these lives. We'll meet the people behind the phenomena. We'll see not just what they can do, but how it reshapes our understanding of the possible. And always we'll return to one central tension between what we know and what we don't. Between the charts and scans and theories and the raw, mysterious reality of what a single human being can sometimes do. This is not a story about proving the supernatural. It's about uncovering the deeper nature of the natural world, about how little we truly understand of the tools we carry inside us. The lightning doesn't give a man his gift. It reveals it. The trauma doesn't create genius. It opens the door to a room that was always there. Perhaps the most haunting thought of all is this: if such abilities lie dormant in some of us, might they live within all of us? So we begin here, in the space between knowledge and wonder. In these next chapters, you will encounter 10 abilities that defy reason, each one a lens into the forgotten dimensions of human potential. We won't always have explanations, but we will have questions, and through them perhaps a glimpse of something greater, not magic, not miracle, just the unexplored truth of what it means to be human. It started with a bolt of lightning. September 2002, a parking lot in Denver, Colorado. Alonzo Clemens, a maintenance worker with no particular interest in numbers, is crossing toward his car when the sky splits open. A surge of electricity courses through his body, powerful enough to kill. But Clemens doesn't die. When he wakes up in a hospital bed 3 days later, the world looks the same, but something inside him is irreversibly changed. Numbers now speak to him. Clemens, who once struggled with basic arithmetic, can suddenly perform mathematical feats that baffle even professional mathematicians. 7-digit multiplications, square roots to dozens of decimal places, complex equations solved in seconds, all without formal training or hesitation. But what astonishes researchers isn't just the speed of his calculations, it's how he experiences them. To Clemens, numbers are no longer abstract symbols. Prime numbers appear as shades of blue. Perfect squares spiral outward in golden ratios. Equations take shape as floating geometric forms he can rotate in his mind like sculptures. This is numerical synesthesia, an exceedingly rare trait where mathematical relationships are felt as physical, sensory experiences. For Clemens, math isn't solved, it reveals itself. Dr. Daryl Trefevert, one of the world's foremost experts on Savant syndrome, leads a team to study Clemens. What they find defies explanation. Brain scans show neural activity in regions not typically associated with mathematical reasoning. New pathways, formed it seems by the lightning strike, link distant parts of the brain in patterns never before documented. The firing speed of Clemens's neurons exceeds known limits. His solutions come not through logic, but through intuition, what he describes as asking the numbers what they want to be. This is more than genius. It's something else entirely, a window into latent potential. Clemens did not study his way into brilliance. It was unlocked in an instant, suggesting that the human brain may harbor extraordinary capabilities that lay dormant in all of us. And yet, Clemens remains humble. He speaks of his abilities with wonder, not pride. He doesn't pretend to understand why this happened to him. He simply listens to the language of numbers, and they answer. His story forces a question few are prepared to confront. What if intelligence, as we define it, is only one layer of the mind? What if beneath the conscious mind lies a reservoir of abilities that most of us never access, only glimpsed through trauma, chance, or a spark from the sky? Clemens's gift didn't come from study or effort. It came from a storm, from lightning that tore through his body and rewired his brain. What emerged was not something new, but something waiting in silence, in circuits, in the unexplored depths of who we are. And if it happened to him, could it happen again? Could the genius of numbers, the visions of spirals, the intuition of primes, be less a miracle and more a message? A message from within, whispering, "There is more to you than you know. What if you could see without eyes?" Daniel Kish was born without vision. By every definition, he is blind. And yet he moves through the world with uncanny precision, riding bicycles through traffic, hiking through forests, navigating unfamiliar buildings without assistance. He doesn't use a cane. He doesn't rely on touch. Instead, he clicks. A soft, rhythmic sound made with his tongue. Click, 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 echoes outward, bounces off walls, cars, trees, people, and returns to him. His brain reads those echoes and assembles a mental image of the world around him. It's called echolocation, a skill found in bats and dolphins, and somehow Kish has brought it to life in a human body. But this isn't just adaptation. It's transformation. Brain scans reveal that Kish's visual cortex, the part of the brain responsible for processing sight, activates when he echolocates. In blind individuals, this area is typically dormant, but in Kish, it lights up. His brain, it seems, has rewired itself to turn sound into sight. Dr. Mel Goodale, a neuroscientist at Western University, tested Kish under controlled conditions. The results were startling. Kish could detect objects as small as a pencil from across the room. He could distinguish between materials based solely on how sound reflected from them. In outdoor settings, he could identify trees, fences, open paths, all with the same ease as a sighted person. Most astonishing of all, he could hear facial expressions. The minute shifts in muscle and skin, too subtle for most ears, create echoes that Kish interprets as smiles, frowns, surprise. In essence, he doesn't imagine what's around him. He perceives it. The implications are staggering. Kish founded an organization to teach echolocation to others, and the results suggest that this isn't a unique mutation. It's a skill, one that many people can learn, given time and training. His students, blind from birth or due to injury, begin to map their world through sound, unlocking a sensory dimension that had gone silent. Science still doesn't fully understand how it works. How can the brain translate echo patterns into spatial maps? How does the auditory system reroute itself to engage the visual cortex? And more hauntingly, why don't more people know this is possible? We often assume that blindness is a closed door. That sight, once lost, can't be recovered. But Kish's life is a testament to the opposite. It suggests that the brain is not limited by what it lacks. It adapts, reconfigures, evolves. The door may have closed, but another opened. One we didn't know existed. What does it mean for the rest of us? If sound can become sight, what other senses lie just beyond our reach? Are we walking around with dormant capabilities, skills we never tapped because we've never had to? And if so, what would it take to awaken them? Daniel Kish teaches us more than echolocation. He teaches that human perception is not fixed, that the brain is not just a machine, but an artist, capable of painting a picture from echoes. And in that picture, we glimpse the future of human potential, not fantasy, not science fiction, but a sound in the dark becoming light. Click, click, click. The world replies. What if your mind could never forget? Jill Price remembers every day of her life with perfect, involuntary detail. Not just birthdays or milestones, but the ordinary Tuesdays, the quiet Thursdays, the mundane moments most of us forget before they even finish happening. Ask her what she wore on November 8, 1991, and she'll tell you. Ask what song was playing on the radio that morning or what the weather felt like. She remembers that too. She doesn't need a journal. Her life is the journal. This rare ability is called Highly Superior Autobiographical Memory, or HSAM. Only a handful of confirmed cases exist. But none are quite like Price. Her memory is so precise, so comprehensive, that it defies the known architecture of the brain. She doesn't use mnemonic tricks or techniques. She doesn't try to remember. Her memories come unbidden, rushing back with vivid emotional color and cinematic clarity. When she first reached out to researchers in 2006, she described it as a burden. "I can't stop remembering," she said. "It's like watching my life on a screen that never turns off." What began as a cry for help became a scientific mystery. Dr. James McGaugh at UC Irvine took on the challenge of understanding Price's mind. Over months of testing, she answered date after date, question after question, with a consistency and speed that left no room for chance. Cross-referenced with journals, media archives, and eyewitnesses, her memories checked out. Not just the facts, but the moods, the context, the textures of each passing day. Brain scans revealed enlarged and unusually active regions in her hippocampus and temporal lobes, areas responsible for memory storage and emotional processing. Her brain, it seemed, was recording everything, every interaction, every scent, every passing thought. But this wasn't just about recall, it was about capacity. Neuroscience has long believed that the brain filters out most of what we experience, out of necessity. We remember the important and discard the rest. But Price's mind filters nothing. Every experience, no matter how trivial, is kept, cataloged, and preserved. And yet her memory isn't photographic in the traditional sense. She doesn't recall textbooks or trivia with the same precision. Her gift, or curse, is deeply personal. It's tied to emotion, to narrative, to the story of self. Which raises a profound question. What is memory for? Is it a tool for survival, sharpened by emotion and relevance? Or is it something more, something that defines identity itself? Jill Price's mind suggests that memory isn't just what we remember, it's who we are. But there's a shadow to this gift. Price has spoken openly about the pain. She can't forget the arguments, the losses, the regrets. They replay with the same rawness as the day they happened. There's no distance, no softening with time. Every joy is eternal, but so is every wound. Her life is a living archive, a perfect record of the past. And in that perfection lies both clarity and torment. We often wish we could remember more. But what if forgetting is just as essential? What if memory's imperfections are what make healing possible? In Jill Price, we see what the mind can do when it refuses to let go. A mirror held up to time itself, unblinking, unrelenting. And behind that mirror, perhaps, is the question that lingers. If the brain can remember everything, what else is it capable of? What if fear could make you stronger than physics allows? It happened on a cold January afternoon in 2012. Angela Cavallo heard a crash outside her home and ran to find her teenage son pinned beneath a Chevrolet Impala. The car had slipped off its jack. Metal crushed against pavement. Her son wasn't moving. And then something impossible occurred. Angela, a woman in her 50s with no athletic background, lifted the 3,000-pound vehicle, enough for neighbors to pull her son to safety. It shouldn't have happened. Her bones, her muscles, her joints, none of them should have withstood the force. But in that moment, none of it mattered. She lifted the impossible. And then, as suddenly as it began, the strength vanished. This isn't an isolated event. There are hundreds of accounts throughout medical literature describing similar bursts of superhuman strength. Parents lifting cars, hikers fending off wild animals, small-framed individuals holding back collapsing beams. The phenomenon has a name: hysterical strength. It's a mystery that challenges both biology and physics. Under normal conditions, humans can activate about 60 to 70% of their muscle fibers. The rest are kept in reserve, shut off by protective neural mechanisms designed to prevent injury. But during hysterical strength episodes, those limits seem to dissolve. Every fiber ignites. Muscles contract at full capacity, and the body performs acts that defy its structure. Researchers like Dr. Vladimir Zasiorsky have studied the phenomenon for decades. The working theory points to adrenaline, a flood of stress hormones that surge during life-threatening situations. But the levels observed during these episodes often exceed what should be survivable, raising more questions than answers. What's even stranger is the precision of the effect. The strength appears exactly when needed. It targets the muscles involved in the task. And once the danger passes, the body reverts, often without injury. How does the brain know how far to go without causing damage? In 2009, Lydia Angu, a 110-pound woman, physically fought off a polar bear attacking a group of children. In 1982, Tony Cavallo, no relation to Angela, lifted a Cadillac off a cyclist's crushed leg. Each case seems to emerge from the same source: terror, love, urgency. And yet something more, some switch inside the brain unlocking full body potential with perfect timing. Researchers at the University of Victoria have found temporary changes in neural connectivity during hysterical strength events. Areas of the brain usually isolated from conscious control, those responsible for muscle inhibition, appear to go offline. The result? Unfiltered access to pure power, but only for a moment. Which begs the question, why don't we access this strength all the time? Why keep it hidden? Perhaps it's safety. If we lived in a constant state of maximum exertion, we'd tear ourselves apart. Perhaps it's evolutionary, designed for survival, not routine. Or perhaps, as some suggest, it reveals a deeper truth, that human limitations are not always physical, but psychological. The body holds back until something tells it not to. Angela Cavallo didn't know she could lift a car. She didn't think. She moved. And in doing so, she touched a power most of us will never feel. It raises a haunting possibility. What strength lies within us, buried beneath belief and biology, waiting for the right moment to rise? Not superhuman, just human, unleashed. What if your brain could outpace a machine? In a crowded auditorium in London, 1980, Shakuntala Devi stands at a blackboard. The challenge? Multiply two 13-digit numbers, faster than a room full of mathematicians can input them into a calculator. In under 30 seconds, she gives the correct answer. The audience is stunned. The machine confirms it. She smiles softly and steps away. This was not a trick. Devi, born in India in 1929, possessed a mind that could compute with speed and accuracy beyond anything science could explain. As a child, she solved cube roots before she could write. As an adult, she outperformed supercomputers of her time. But her story is not just about numbers. It's about the mystery of how the human brain can process information at a level that challenges our understanding of thought itself. Researchers at Imperial College London and UC Berkeley studied Devi extensively. Brain imaging revealed activity in regions not typically associated with math, suggesting her mind used alternate pathways. She didn't calculate in the traditional sense. When asked how she solved such vast problems, she often replied, "I just see it." She visualized numbers as shapes, colors, and rhythms. Multiplication became movement. Divisions took form as cascading patterns. Her methods were unlike any taught in classrooms. They were intuitive, visual, and instantaneous. It wasn't rote memorization. Devi could solve problems she'd never seen before, involving advanced mathematical concepts for which she'd received no formal training. And even more remarkably, she could teach others. Students who trained with her began to develop faster, more flexible math skills by focusing on patterns and symmetry rather than formulas. Dr. Arthur Jensen noted something extraordinary in his analysis of her mind. Devi's answers didn't emerge from a step-by-step process. They arrived whole, as if her brain skipped the line between question and answer, bypassing the deliberate work of logic in favor of something deeper, something automatic. Her abilities force us to re-examine our assumptions about intelligence. Are limits in math, and perhaps in all subjects, a result of biology, or are they shaped by how we're taught to think? What Devi embodied was a form of cognitive freedom, a loosening of the mental boundaries we're trained into. She didn't approach math as a chore. She danced with it. To her, numbers were alive. They played. They whispered their secrets if you listened the right way. Her legacy remains not just in record books, but in the challenge she posed to scientists, educators, and the curious. What if genius isn't reserved for the few? What if it's a way of seeing, and we've simply forgotten how to look? Devi showed us that the human brain may possess capacities far beyond what standardized tests can measure. That numerical intuition isn't magic. It's a latent possibility, a muscle we've stopped flexing. And if numbers can be seen, not just computed, if answers can emerge from within, not just be derived, then perhaps intelligence is not a fixed line but a landscape, one we've barely begun to explore. What if you could feel the earth move before it does? Giuseppe Mercalli was not a mystic. He was a scientist, a geologist by training. Yet he possessed a sense that science couldn't explain. Born in Italy in 1850, Mercalli could walk through a landscape and feel something others couldn't. A quiet tug, a tremor beneath still ground, a tension in the air. He called it magnetic trembling. And more often than not, within hours or days, an earthquake would follow. Mercalli didn't see the future. He sensed it. Even as a child, he could navigate through fog or dense forest with no landmarks. He always seemed to know where north was, as if an invisible compass turned in his chest. Over time, he realized his internal orientation wasn't just about direction. It responded to shifts in the earth itself. Subtle changes in magnetic fields, imperceptible to instruments of the time, were vivid to him. They buzzed behind his eyes. They changed the way the world felt. Early in the 20th century, researchers put him to the test. Blindfolded, spun around, placed in unfamiliar locations, still he could point to magnetic north with uncanny accuracy within a degree or two. He detected local magnetic variations caused by underground structures. He predicted earthquakes with an accuracy that shocked fellow scientists, often citing nothing but an unsettled feeling in the Earth's energy. In 1908, days before the catastrophic Messina earthquake, Mercalli warned of electromagnetic chaos in the region. His prediction was ignored. The quake killed over 100,000 people. His warning was buried with the rubble, but not forgotten. Modern research now suggests Mercalli may not have been unique. Some humans possess weak magnetoreception, the ability to detect Earth's magnetic field. Studies have found magnetite crystals in the human brain and inner ear, the same biological materials birds and whales use to navigate vast distances. But for most of us, the sense lies dormant. If Mercalli's brain accessed it, it wasn't through training. It was something else, an instinct brought to the surface. What makes his case even more remarkable is that his sense remained reliable in cities near electrical lines, surrounded by interference. His brain filtered out artificial noise and honed in on the planet's pulse. Imagine being able to feel magnetic direction, to know where you are without maps or stars. Imagine sensing the Earth's unrest before it breaks the surface. Mercalli could. And if he could, the possibility exists that we all carry some echo of that power within us. It reframes how we think about instinct. We assume it's primal, vague, emotional. But what if instinct is sensory? What if the body knows more than it tells us, quietly tracking signals we've been taught to ignore? Mercalli wasn't superhuman. He was deeply human, just attuned to signals most of us have forgotten how to hear. And that brings us to a deeper reflection. If Earth speaks in magnetic whispers, and if we once heard them, what else have we stopped listening to? Not because we can't, but because somewhere along the way, we chose not to. What if your eyes could remember everything they saw? In a sunlit studio in London, a man sits before a blank canvas. He's just returned from a 20-minute helicopter ride above the city. No sketches, no photographs. Just memory, and then, line by line, Stephen Wiltshire begins to draw. Hours pass. The panorama of London takes shape in exacting detail. Every window, every rooftop, every subtle curve of the skyline. When urban planners later examine the drawing, they find it accurate down to the individual brick patterns on buildings. Wiltshire has recreated the city with more precision than most cameras, and he did it from memory. Wiltshire, diagnosed with autism as a child, didn't speak until he was 9. But before he spoke, he drew. His earliest sketches, cars, buildings, cityscapes, revealed a startling truth. His mind recorded the world in perfect visual fidelity. He doesn't memorize in the way we understand it. He experiences, and once seen, the image stays. Dr. Oliver Sacks, the renowned neurologist, studied Wiltshire and found his brain's visual cortex was hyperactive, almost electrically charged with detail. What's more, this activity connected directly to the motor areas controlling his hand. His memory didn't just recall images, it translated them instantly into movement. But this wasn't just static recall. Wiltshire could watch a bustling street, full of moving cars and pedestrians, and later recreate not only the architecture but the motion, where people stood, how traffic lights changed, how shadows fell. His mind didn't take mental snapshots. It recorded living scenes. Unlike photographic memory, as it's commonly imagined, Wiltshire's ability didn't rely on effort or technique. He didn't try to remember. The information imprinted itself. No filters, no selection, just total visual absorption. And it wasn't a gift exclusive to him. Studies suggest that a subset of individuals on the autism spectrum exhibit similar capabilities. Extreme visual processing paired with powerful retention. But the mechanism behind it remains elusive. How does a brain absorb so much detail without becoming overwhelmed? How does it retain complexity without conscious sorting? And why do most of us forget so much so quickly? Perhaps the answer lies in what we consider normal. Our minds filter to survive, to prioritize, to focus, to ignore the unnecessary. But what if that filtration comes at a cost? What if buried beneath those mental defenses is a deeper capacity, one we rarely access? Wiltshire's art invites us to reconsider what memory means. It isn't just a record of the past, it's a bridge between perception and understanding. His drawings are not just replications, they're revelations of how much the human mind can see, of how much it can hold, of how much we miss. We move through the world, glancing, glimpsing, forgetting. He watches and remembers, not because he tries to, but because his mind, in its quiet brilliance, refuses to let go of what it sees. And in that refusal, he offers a mirror. What are we truly capable of observing, if we learn to see again? What if your touch could heal the body beyond medicine? In a small healing center in Brazil, people gather from across the world. Some arrive in wheelchairs. Others carry X-rays or diagnoses they were told had no cure. They come not for surgery or drugs, but for a man known simply as João, John of God. And somehow many leave transformed. Under controlled medical observation, João Teixeira de Faria performs what's been called psychic surgery. No scalpels, no anesthesia, often no physical contact at all. Yet patients report healing from cancer, neurological disorders, and chronic illnesses long thought untreatable. These are not rumors. They are documented cases, studied by physicians, captured in data. Dr. Jeffrey Martin from Harvard Medical School observed Faria firsthand. He watched as tumors shrank, as blood markers normalized, as function returned to damaged limbs. Tests confirmed what shouldn't have been possible. Even more astonishing, when patients were monitored during sessions, measurable physiological changes occurred in real time. Improved immune function, reduced inflammation, accelerated cellular regeneration. How? That question lingers unanswered. Brain scans of Faria during healing sessions revealed unusual gamma-wave activity, patterns associated with heightened states of awareness, empathy, and deep meditation. It's as if his mind entered a state that influenced not only his own physiology, but the biology of those around him. And the phenomenon wasn't confined to him alone. Students trained by Faria developed, to lesser degrees, similar effects. Touch-based therapies showed measurable results in healing rates and immune responses. Could healing be a skill, a dormant capacity of human consciousness, rather than an unexplainable miracle? Dr. Marilyn Schlitz from the Institute of Noetic Sciences led studies that echoed the same results. The body, it seemed, could respond to intention, to presence. The old divide between mind and body blurred. A hand placed with care on a shoulder could do more than comfort. It could restore. Still, skepticism is inevitable and necessary. The scientific method demands rigor, and many of these claims walk a narrow line between wonder and wishful thinking. But dismissing them outright ignores a growing body of evidence. The mind can influence the body in ways we don't yet understand. Placebo effect? Perhaps. But when tumors shrink and mobility returns, is the mechanism less important than the outcome? Maybe we've misunderstood the role of consciousness in biology. Perhaps awareness itself is not just a bystander, but an agent, able to influence cells, signals, and healing pathways we haven't yet mapped. In the presence of Faria, the laws of medicine didn't break. They bent. And that bending leads us to a deeper question. If healing can come from within, from intention, from connection, from focus, then what limits have we placed on recovery simply because we don't believe it's possible? What if the body is waiting, not just for medicine, but for us? For presence, for attention, for belief strong enough to spark the systems we forgot how to use. John of God reminds us of a possibility, that healing isn't always a battle fought with steel and drugs. Sometimes it's a dialogue between mind and flesh, between the seen and the unseen, between what we know and what we're just beginning to feel. And in that dialogue, perhaps, lies the future of medicine. What if language was woven into your brain from birth, no matter your IQ? Christopher is a quiet man with an unassuming presence. He cannot live independently. He struggles with simple arithmetic, cannot tie his own shoes, and has an IQ of 67. Yet he speaks, reads, and writes more than 20 languages fluently. Danish, Polish, Greek, Turkish, Welsh, Hindi. His linguistic repertoire spans continents. He learns new ones with uncanny speed, often needing only a few weeks to master grammar, syntax, and vocabulary. This contradiction, low cognitive ability alongside linguistic genius, baffles every traditional theory of intelligence. His case was first studied by linguists Neil Smith and Ianthe Maria Tsimpley at University College London. They tested him rigorously. Artificial languages, newly constructed for research purposes, were presented to him. He absorbed them effortlessly. He didn't just memorize vocabulary. He understood their underlying structure, their rhythm, their logic. In 2 weeks, he could create new sentences, explain grammatical rules, and even correct native speakers of natural languages he'd barely encountered. Brain scans revealed the impossible. Christopher's language centers were hyperconnected, active at levels rarely seen in any individual, let alone someone with a diagnosed learning disability. The rest of his brain, meanwhile, showed standard signs of cognitive impairment. It was as if a cathedral of linguistic capacity had been built inside a modest village. The most remarkable part? His talent isn't limited to spoken word. He masters sign language as easily as sound. Whether spoken or gestured, language enters his mind fully formed, understood without conscious effort. He doesn't study. He listens, and he knows. This points to something extraordinary about human language. It may be more than a learned behavior. It may be hardwired. Christopher's case suggests that the brain contains built-in modules for language acquisition, systems that can function independently from general intelligence. He embodies the theory that humans are born with an innate grammatical instinct, a biological readiness to decode and generate language, regardless of environment or intellect. And yet, Christopher isn't just a case study. He's a person. His life is filled with paradoxes, brilliance and dependency, fluency and fragility. He reminds us that intelligence is not a single line on a chart, but a mosaic. That minds can be uneven, capable of greatness in one domain and struggle in another. His story also challenges how we teach and measure learning. If someone like Christopher can intuitively master the world's languages, what potential lies within those of us who've been told we're simply not good at it? What if fluency isn't a matter of talent, but of unlocking what already lives inside the brain? Christopher forces us to rethink the boundary between disability and gift. He shows us that genius does not always wear the face we expect, that deep within the folds of the human mind there are rivers of understanding that flow with or without our permission. He speaks to us in 20 tongues, but his message is singular. We are born to communicate, and perhaps the only thing standing in our way is how we define what's possible. What if you could command your body's temperature through thought alone? Wim Hof, known around the world as the Iceman, has done what science long deemed impossible. He has run marathons barefoot in the Arctic, submerged himself in ice water for nearly 2 hours without any drop in core temperature, and climbed Mount Everest in nothing but shorts. Where others would freeze, he thrives. But Hof isn't a genetic anomaly. He says anyone can do what he does, and researchers are beginning to believe him. At Wayne State University, scientists monitored Hof under extreme cold exposure. What they observed defied physiology. His core temperature remained stable, his heart rate and oxygen levels optimal, but he wasn't shivering. He wasn't moving. He was breathing, deep, rhythmic, focused, and simply willing his body to adapt. More remarkably, he taught others to do the same. Controlled studies showed that his students, after weeks of training, were able to withstand cold, suppress inflammatory responses, and even influence their immune systems, all through Hof's method of breathing and mental control. This suggests something once considered absurd, that humans may possess the ability to consciously influence the autonomic nervous system. The part of the brain responsible for functions we're told we can't control: heart rate, inflammation, temperature, hormone levels. But Hof does. On command. Brain imaging during cold exposure revealed heightened activity in regions responsible for pain modulation and interoception, our internal sense of the body. It's as if his brain rewired itself to treat cold not as a threat, but as information. And through this altered state, he achieves what thermoregulation experts once said was unachievable. His breathing method, flooding the body with oxygen, holding, then releasing, activates brown adipose tissue. These are specialized fat cells that generate heat. Normally dormant in adults, Hof's technique reawakens them. His body becomes a furnace, stoked by breath and willpower. But perhaps the most significant finding is what this means beyond the cold. Hof's method also improves immune function, reduces stress responses, and boosts mental clarity. In one study, participants injected with endotoxins showed near-zero symptoms after using his technique. They literally changed their body's reaction to illness through breathing and focus. So what does this reveal about human potential? We have long believed that the boundary between conscious and unconscious control was fixed, that the body runs on autopilot, that our physiology is out of reach. But Hof's life cracks that boundary wide open. He shows that what we call limits may be habits, patterns shaped by culture, not biology. He reminds us that the mind and body are not separate, but entwined. That the breath, a rhythm so basic we hardly notice it, may be the bridge between them. When asked what drives him, Hof says simply, nature and love. It's not about breaking records. It's about awakening what we've forgotten. And that leads to the question that pulses through all of his work. If the breath can change the body, what else might we reclaim? If only we learned how to breathe with purpose. What if you were born with sonar and didn't know it? Most of us think of echolocation as something reserved for bats or dolphins. But the human brain, it turns out, may carry the same dormant potential. A kind of sixth sense buried deep within our auditory and spatial systems. One that, in rare cases, awakens. Daniel Kish is one of those cases. Born completely blind, he learned to navigate the world using sound, his own sound. A series of sharp rhythmic tongue clicks that bounce off surfaces and return to him as echoes. From those echoes, he forms a three-dimensional picture of his surroundings. He doesn't just hear the world. He sees it with sound. What began as instinct became expertise. Kish can ride a bicycle through city traffic, hike mountain trails alone, identify a tree, a wall, a trash can, down to size, texture, and shape. Even more remarkably, he can detect facial expressions in others. The slight movement of muscles beneath skin creates echoes his brain has learned to read. A smile sounds different than a frown. This isn't just adaptation, it's a neurological metamorphosis. Neuroscientists studying Kish found something astonishing. His visual cortex, the area of the brain responsible for sight, activates when he echolocates. Despite being blind from birth, his brain has repurposed its sight center to interpret sound. Acoustic information becomes visual experience. Sound becomes vision. It's a living example of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to need. Kish has gone further. He teaches echolocation to others through his organization, World Access for the Blind. And many of his students develop similar abilities. not just basic orientation, but advanced echo navigation. As if the human brain, deprived of sight, naturally seeks another way to perceive space. In experiments, participants trained in echolocation began to show visual cortex activation too. The brain, it seems, has the circuitry for sonar built in. We've just never learned how to use it, because we've never needed to, which raises a deeper question. How many other capabilities lie hidden, unused, simply because our lives don't demand them? Kish's story challenges the idea that our senses are fixed, that we see with our eyes and hear with our ears. In truth, we perceive with our brains, and the brain is far more versatile than we've allowed ourselves to believe. We often treat blindness as a deficit, but in Kish we see a redefinition, a reminder that loss can also be transformation, that limits can be invitations to discover new dimensions of being. He doesn't claim to be special. He says what he does is teachable, learnable, a skill rooted not in miracle, but in practice and attention. So what does this mean for the rest of us? It means the boundaries of human perception are not where we think they are. It means we are capable of evolving in real time, of developing new senses, new maps of the world, if only we listen. And in the silence between clicks, we might begin to hear the sound of our own potential echoing back. What if your body contained more memory than your mind? There are moments when history seems to flicker through the skin, when instinct precedes understanding, and something ancient stirs in the body. For some, this manifests not in thoughts or dreams, but in action, in impossible feats, in movements the conscious mind cannot plan. One such story comes from a boy named Alonzo, whose life changed forever after being struck by lightning and awakening with profound mathematical abilities. Another from Jill Price, who cannot forget a single moment of her life. But in the case of our next subject, the transformation was different, less intellectual, more primal. Her name is Lydia Angu. In 2009, while hiking in Canada, Lydia encountered a polar bear attacking a group of children. Without pause, without training, without weapons, she charged the bear. At 110 pounds, she wrestled with an animal 5 times her size, and she won. The children survived. Lydia walked away shaken but uninjured. Doctors and scientists struggled to explain it. The human body isn't built for that kind of power. Muscles tear, joints give out, pain forces retreat. And yet in that moment, she transcended every known limit. It's a phenomenon known as hysterical strength. And it appears to unlock something buried deep in our physiology, a hidden reserve of power most never access. It has been observed in countless emergency situations. A man lifting a car to save a loved one, a hiker surviving a fall by scaling an impossible incline, a mother snapping steel restraints to reach her trapped child. In these moments, the body becomes something else. Researchers studying the phenomenon have identified certain patterns. The autonomic nervous system floods the body with adrenaline. Muscle fibers, usually kept in reserve, are fully recruited. Pain receptors shut down. The body becomes faster, stronger, more coordinated. And then, just as quickly, it returns to normal. It's as if the brain knows when to unleash the emergency protocols. And only then. But what if it's not just adrenaline? What if these moments reveal something far older, something coded into us across eons of survival? Some neuroscientists believe that hysterical strength may be tied to suppressed motor systems, ancestral capacities that once defined our species in a world of predators and elemental danger. They're not gone. They're dormant, waiting. And when the right trigger hits, usually fear, love, or urgency, they awaken. For a brief, shimmering instant, the body becomes capable of far more than we ever imagined. But only if the mind gets out of the way. What does this mean for the rest of us? It suggests that the boundaries we accept of strength, endurance, resilience are not walls, but habits. That we live far below our potential, not because of biology, but because of conditioning, and that within every body is a reservoir of forgotten power. Lydia didn't train to fight a polar bear. She didn't think it through. Her body acted. Instinct overruled reason, and in that moment she touched the edge of something extraordinary. Not because she was different, but because perhaps we all are, and we've simply forgotten how to access it. The question is not whether this power exists. It's whether we're willing to believe it still lives in us. What if the future of human evolution isn't in technology, but in rediscovery? Across these chapters, we've journeyed through the lives of individuals who defy the known rules of biology and brain science. People who calculate faster than supercomputers, who navigate darkness with echoes, who lift cars, heal with touch, or remember every breath of every day. Their stories are not myths. They are real, documented, studied, and still inexplicable. So what are we to make of them? There's a temptation to call them anomalies, outliers, exceptions that prove the rule. But taken together, they form a different kind of pattern, a hidden architecture of possibility that stretches beneath our understanding of what it means to be human. We are taught to see our limits as facts. Boundaries set by DNA, shaped by biology, confined by evolution. But these lives suggest something else, that many of our limits are illusions, that the capacities we dismiss as impossible may in fact be sleeping within us. Perhaps these abilities, extraordinary memory, unconscious strength, sensory reconfiguration, are not miracles but messages. Messages from the body, from the brain, from some deeper stratum of self that knows more than we admit. Not superhuman, just human, unmasked. Science has measured their effects. Medicine has tracked the changes. Yet the why remains elusive. Why do these traits emerge only in some? Trauma, necessity, rare wiring. None of it offers a complete answer. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that they happen at all. They show us that consciousness can influence physiology, that the mind is not a passenger in the body, but a conductor. That healing, learning, and even survival may not be entirely mechanistic processes, but cooperative ones between awareness and biology. These people remind us that the future isn't just about what we can build or engineer. It's about what we can remember, reclaim, reawaken. Because what if the next stage of evolution isn't artificial intelligence or gene editing? What if it's rediscovering the intelligence already written into our cells? The stories you've heard are not just curiosities. They are invitations to question what you've been told about your body, to wonder what your mind is truly capable of, to explore the space between explanation and awe. In every breath, the body listens. In every moment of attention, the brain adapts. The boundaries we've drawn between the physical and the mental, between what's normal and what's miraculous, are not permanent. They are waiting to be redrawn. So let us end not with an answer, but with a question. What dormant abilities lie within you, waiting for the right moment, the right spark, the right silence, to rise? The mystery of human potential isn't a puzzle to solve. It's a horizon to walk toward, one quiet step at a time.